This takes too long. We're back. No more Mr. Nice Guy. Welcome, everybody. This one's going to be a shorter episode because this is my least favorite chapter in the book. It's the least applicable chapter in the book, and the reason why it's the least applicable chapter in this book is it talks about career success, and it largely holds to what Rollo Massey would call a old order thinking. The gold watch type stuff, being happy in the job you have and security. It doesn't really, it's not how the modern corporate workplace is kind of laid out. At least in my experience and most of the people I talk to who are under the age of 40. So he talks about the things that guys do at work, and you're going to notice a theme on this. They're very similar to the ones that screw up their love lives, and they screw up their psychological maturity here. So he talks about fear, trying to do it right, trying to do everything themselves, self-sabotage, a distorted self-image, deprivation thinking, and staying stuck in familiar but dysfunctional systems. That one I would say is applicable because it's the strangest thing. I wish I could say why or how or what it is involved in people. And Glover kind of touches on it, but if you think of your life as a series of narratives or mental models, it is amazing how many people will pick a horrible book that they know the ending to as a life story rather than one that they're writing themselves that will most likely be more successful, but it's unknown. People are just scared to hell of change. Anybody who doubts me on this one, just think of your office. Anytime you've tried to update or create something that was desperately needed, how much pushback you got. It's one of those things that you just have to kind of get used to. So he talks about, in this case, fear preventing nice guys from getting the life they want. It's a fear that prevents a nice guy from demanding a raise he has promised. It's a fear that keeps a nice guy from going back to school to get education or training he needs to fully pursue a career. It's fear that prevents him from quitting the job he despises. It's fear that gets in the way of starting a business of his dreams. And it's fear that prevents a nice guy from living where he really wants to and doing what he wants to. I'm going to touch on these because I don't know if fear is the right word. I think conflict aversion is a much more accurate one. But again, demanding the raise you've been promised, that, at this point, everybody is cynical enough to the workplace to know that if you don't have something written down, the words aren't worth the paper they're printed on. So if you were promised a promotion, get that in writing, get an email chain to it. Otherwise, it's useless. Now, this isn't even a fear thing. And that's kind of what my point is here. Yes, there's a conflict aversion that prevents you from pursuing these things. But most of these have logistical concerns that most people don't deal with. So let's say you've gone through the first 8 episodes, 38 chapters, you're doing all the breaking free exercises, you've largely gotten rid of all of your unattractive behaviors. When you're at this point, you shouldn't have to be retreading old ground and tying into that loss aversion and the fear of missing out. There's a great series of posts about negotiation on the Married Red Pill. They call it the 60 Days of Dread. The idea of just unscrewing up a guy's life. And raises kind of came into the equation. Now there's a whole thing about the negotiation side of that. Huey McGill, the guy who runs the thing, absolutely good at it. He's in his 50s. He's been on the sales side of engineering for a long time, so he's got a pretty good grasp of both. But for the large part, especially in Canada, to move up is to move out. I'll use banking as an example because I spent a period in there. And there's 5 major banks in Canada. Now, of those major banks, if you've worked in one of them, chances are you've worked in all of them. A lot of guys do contracting work. There's not as many full-time positions as there used to be. It's mostly a lot of contract work. Now, in contract work, in Ontario, you do for 2 years. And then at the end of the 2 years, they either have to hire you on as full-time or cease your contract. So what that ends up being is you got a 2-year rotation of a bunch of different places. It's almost like a military posting schedule. So it's really demanding a raise you've been promised is kind of irrelevant. Going back to school to get education and training you need to pursue a truly fulfilling career. Yeah, I'd say that's a part of it too. But again, it's not so much university, which it matters for certain things. The idea of a degree is it allows you to get your foot in the door. It has a way that they're able to cut off people, because if 2,000 people are going to apply to a position, you're never going to be able to filter them. So it's a nice, easy filtering mechanism. So if you're in one of those careers that require that, then yes. As far as not pursuing it, it's a funny story. In the military, there's a few programs that exist to help you get your secondary education. The idea is they wanted an educated workforce. So the first one is UTP NCM, I believe it's called. It's probably something different now, but that's essentially officer training. You get a recommendation from your commanding officer, and they take you into the Royal Military College. You get a 4-year paid trip to university. You sit there, you do that, and then once you're done, you're obliged to, I think it's 8 or 9 years of military service as an officer. So everybody loves that one. They try it out because it's great, because once it's approved, it's kind of a thing. Nothing's paid for. Daddy handles it. Now, there's a second program that was called an Individual Learning Plan, or an ILP. This one is a little simpler. You don't need approvals. It's completely outside of your chain of command. You go get your education. You pay for it up front. And then when you pass, you give your transcripts over to the department, and they give you your money back. Nobody uses that one. That was how I actually got my second degree. At the time, I was leaving the military, and I'm like, great, I have a very good grasp of information security to military level, but I'm like, yeah, there's really no civilian equivalence of what I do here, so I got to get some equivalent stuff. So you got your CISSP, you got another degree, because my first one was graphic design, which didn't really count for much. But I remember this. So I'd go in, I'd take a full course load, and it sucked because there was a lot of nights out with my buddies that I'd miss. We'd go out drinking, that sort of thing. It wasn't even so much fear, it was comfort that would have prevented me from doing that. Like taking university, it's not hard to pass. With the work ethic, I went up to an A+ student. I actually got commended by the staff down there going, yeah, most people just take one course out of 5 and they use that to like pad their evaluation reviews per year to get promotions. But you actually just took full course loads. It was awesome. Turns out there's a huge amount of subsidies in that too. So it's actually like the comfort of wanting to go drinking with your buddies on the weekend is strong enough that you're willing to give up $24,000 in grants essentially, as well as like a good $10,000 in tax rebates. So it's really, like I said, it's not fear, it's comfort, because it's comfortable to go drinking with your buddies. You're in a very safe, stable position. Nothing can go wrong as long as you do what you're told. So I don't think fear is an applicable one in this one. As far as preventing a nice guy from quitting a job he despises, I will 100% recommend that as accurate. Most guys are terrified. Like the military was a perfect example. And it's not even if you weren't terrified of it, a lot of the older chiefs and petty officers, they would suggest like, this is the best job you're ever going to have, yada, yada, yada. And it was essentially instilling in your head that this job is the golden parachute. And if you leave it, you're screwed. And the pension this and the pension that. It's all BS. I mean, in the 12 years of service I had, they actually clawed back our pension service 3 different times. So there was no guarantee. And it's been clawed back again from what I understand. So essentially, that golden parachute was just a promise. And it looked like they weren't really fulfilling their end. And by the time you got it, probably wouldn't be worth the paper it printed on, but you wasted 20 years of your life looking forward to it. It's fear that prevents a nice guy from living where he really wants to and doing what he really wants to do. I would argue this one 100%. I mean, we have no shortage of field reports of guys that had a girlfriend. They really liked her. She had to move to some town for work or for college. He gives up his career choices or education choices and moves over with her. And then she ends up dumping him 6 months later. Not realizing that her not wanting to be around him, the medium was the message. She actually just kind of wanted a way out while still keeping things amicable because girls are conflict averse. One of the guys ended up losing his job at Google for that. Like he was going to get on at Google, but she wanted to move to Iowa or something like that. So that really sucked for him. And a lot of people have issue with, like if your family is all in one city, what are the odds that you're going to move out? I don't know. It's foreign to me, but I'm amazed how many people refuse to move away from their high school friends or their family, even though it would be extremely successful to do so. And especially when their high school friends tend to be like loser dropouts. They just smoke weed all day. They never accomplish anything. Your family's dysfunctional, but guys still stick around for that. And it makes no sense. Again, it's that comfort thing. It's not fear. It's comfort. And he brings up a couple examples of why there's that fear of success. It's their fear they're going to be found out to be frauds. A lot of people don't think they fit in. Again, it's not really typical of a nice guy thing. This is more like just general thing. It codes too simple for man. It codes for people. You won't be able to live up to people's expectations. They will be criticized. They won't be able to handle the increased expectations. They lose control over their lives, and they will do something to mess up everything. Rather than facing these fears, real or imagined, nice guys typically settle for the operating at a fraction of their full potential. Again, this is the kind of thing that extremely neurotic people put up with. I wouldn't say this is so much a man issue as it is a human issue. Like, again, not the kind of issue that most guys come up with. If you're in a marriage and you've reached a dead bedroom, you ended up on the married red pill, chances are these ones aren't issues. And I haven't heard a lot of people talk about it. Now, younger people, totally. But younger people don't have the experience of failure that older people have. It's just a thing. If you go through life, eventually you're going to get kicked in the nards a couple times. And after it's been 1 or 2 or 3 times, you realize it's not so bad. Like, what was the expectation? Back when I was a teenager, they expected that the average adult was going to have to shift careers 7 times. 7 times in a probably like 40-year working period. So that's once every like so many years. And it's gone up since then. It's now at the point where it's the gig economy, where it's not even like we've come closer to going back to the cottage industry than we actually have to multiple vastly shifting careers. So again, this stuff's not really applicable to modern people. Older people, probably, especially ones that are in industries where it's harder to get rid of, but those are becoming few and far between. Trying to do it right prevents nice guys from getting the life they want. He talks about a bunch of stuff in here, but he's essentially describing perfectionism. And perfectionism is horrible. When we talk about high IQ guys failing in life, I think it's Talib calls it midwits, guys who are overeducated and underutilized, I guess is the best way to put it. And they have this grandiose sense of self, builds up from a sense of narcissism. Perfectionism plays into all of that. It's the idea that if I can't get this perfect the first time, or if this doesn't come natural to me because I'm a super smart guy, I'm very intelligent, my mommy told me so. If that doesn't happen, then I'm not even going to try because there's no chance I'm going to break my winning streak as super smartest guy of the universe. Do you feel me on this one? Again, it's these self-imposed limits that nice guys are dissatisfied, bored, or unhappy with their life or vocation, which is true. Honestly, I've never been good at relating to this one. I've been very blessed in that I don't really have issue with just packing up and moving. I've been fairly nomadic, and I know there's probably some guys in the chat who are the same here. But part of it is just understanding how hard it is to fail right now. Like, it's very easy to muddle along at a 50% life, but to truly fail is impossible. Like, I'll put an example here. Let's take this guy. Let's name him Anthony. And let's say he runs a convention in Central Florida somewhere. I don't know, pulling an example out of my ass. Let's say then he alienates just about anybody who helps him get any good attendance to build his business. And 2 years later, he's still ranting about like random stuff and acting like a crazy person on the internet. Now, that guy isn't starving in the street. So like, what? You're a smart guy. You're not ego invested, and you don't have like a coke addiction. So I'm pretty sure you'll be fine. And that's part of it, is just seeing how easy failures have it in life right now. Now, if you are a failure, that gives you confidence in that, okay, so worst case scenario, I just end up like this guy who's living in a 6 square block radius in Seattle there, watching a SoundCloud rapper sleep with all the girls. Best case scenario, you look at these guys going, well, this guy's doing all right. I'll be fine. And it's something that actually helped me through a lot of military courses. Like, there's some that you just kind of have to go through the motions and get to, but there's some that are actually difficult. And the best mindset, it came from me, it came from clearance divers, friends of mine, realize that other people have already gotten through it. So it's not unsolvable. There's tons of examples of it. So when you go through it, you just turn off your brain to that part of it that suggests that failure is an option. Now, it may be an option. You may break your leg during the course or whatever, but other people have done it, so it's doable. And that should give you enough fortitude to get through it. I'd argue that thinking less and doing more is probably your best friend there, because it is amazing the amount of sexless dudes out there and navel gazing. If you do a Venn diagram of it, I'd say they're perfectly overlapped. Absolutely ridiculous. Trying to do everything themselves prevents nice guys from getting the life they want. Again, that taps into that perfectionism thing. You can't trust anybody else to do a job 99% as good as you, so you have to do everything yourself. And then the problem with that is you end up running yourself ragged. You're missing out on opportunities. The opportunity cost, or the cost that you spend over things that you didn't do because you were doing this, is always super high. And what a lot of successful people have understood is that if I can get 3 people to do my job half as well as me, that's half as much productivity more than I would have doing it myself, and I have a ton of free time. Part of this is understanding that you may be not the best, but part of it is also understanding that even if you are the best, your time is more important than showing off how great you are at widget making or whatever it is you're doing. And this is something that I haven't seen anybody learn it other than the hard way. Like, most guys, you first join the military, you first start a job, you're rip-roaring, ready to go, you hate downtime, and you always get these old guys telling you to pace yourself, and you're always like, shut up, old man. And then your first time you burn out is when you realize they have a point. Now, he describes it fairly well. There's not really any actionable advice on this because the kind of guy who's rip-roaring, ready to go like this won't listen to reason. He has to learn it the hard way. So if you had to do a strategy on this, I would strongly suggest you burn yourself out quicker as opposed to slower. Do it before you have 3 kids and a mortgage, before you're too old to recover quickly. Burn out so you know that you have limits. Again, I think I even have a chapter in my book on that. Fuck Files, by the way. Amazon, Kobo. Check it out if you haven't. It's definitely worthwhile. The next section, sabotage prevents nice guys from getting the life they want. They undermine their success through self-sabotage, wasting time, making excuses, not finishing projects, caretaking other people, having too many projects going at once, getting caught up in chaotic relationships, procrastinating, and not setting boundaries. These are all standard. We've talked about them before. I'm not going to go into them. Having said that, the making excuses and having too many projects going on at once, I think those ones are worth delving into a bit more. So excuses, the best excuses don't sound like excuses. And the way to tell an excuse apart from anything else is, at the end of all that talking, is anything getting done? If the answer is no, it's an excuse. You might say to yourself, well, that just means, like, why don't I just not do it? I'm like, yeah, well, you decided not to do something. That's an action. Making excuses is always about never taking the responsibility for saying yes or no. It's always about making things so untenable that the other person finally gives up. And if it sounds familiar to you, it should, because that's exactly the same way that a lot of girls will break up with people, because they do not like conflict. They do not like making decisions and being responsible for those decisions. So what you'll get is, instead of like making an excuse, you're just going to constantly add roadblocks. So if you're working and a project manager's trying to put this stuff, you keep throwing roadblocks at them, hoping that the project manager takes the decision that, yeah, this won't work. Very feminine behavior. And you're probably going to not be able to not see it at work. The other one, having too many projects going at once. I would argue this one is probably a fear-based response more than anything. So especially during the COVID times here, everybody's having to tighten their belt loops. Companies are having a hard time keeping up revenues. They've probably had a bunch of furloughs, maybe some layoffs, and you're stuck there doing the work of 3 people for once. There's the fear of, well, if I'm not handling all this stuff, then I'm probably going to get canned as well. And there's tons of situations where people notice this, where a company will keep being just under the gun. And this is like video game programmers during crunch time, because if we don't make this, then... The key part to remember is this wonderful saying I remember hearing from the supply department. It's that your lack of planning does not necessitate my emergency. So if a company didn't plan for hard times, if a company didn't plan to reprioritize things, it's really not your priority to burn yourself out. And a lot of people do that because, I mean, you work for a company, you get a relationship with people, you want things to go well, and you want things to work smoothly, and you like it when things work. Here's the problem, though. Let's say you pull out 150%. You burn the candle at both ends. You gain a bunch of weight. You work 20 hours a day. You do the entrepreneur stuff to get something done and back on track. Excellent. You did it. So what does management see now? Management sees they set an unrealistic goal and it got met. So clearly the goal wasn't unrealistic and they continue to push. Well, if this was good, let's try this plus 10%. And it's literally pushing their people to their limits. Sometimes you have to let a system fail for a system to change. And it's, again, I've never found a way to convince somebody of this. It's just one of those things they have to try and experience for themselves. I wish I had some magic words for you to understand it, but I don't. If you're given 200% of your potential workload to get done, and because of some like emergency, because of layoffs, because of a virus, because whatever, this can't get done. So obviously there's mechanisms to do that. You go to your boss saying, look, I have times for 3 things here. Out of the 4 things, you need to pick one to go. Or sometimes it's just, and they just tell you like, here, take it, don't worry about it. And you just have to let it fail. You cover your tracks. You make mention that, look, there's not enough people, not enough resources for this. Once it gets to the point where something does fail, your butt's covered, and then they realize, okay, it was aimed a little too high, and you're going to find something. You're going to find the world doesn't end and the company doesn't go bankrupt. And this is kind of a freeing thing because then it makes you realize, oh, so all this fear that we've kind of had instilled in us on this stuff, all this sense of dread, all this aversion to failure, it's all just smoke and mirrors. Like nothing really fails. The world still keeps turning. Consequently, nice guys find many creative ways to make sure they are never too successful. If they don't start something, they won't fail. If they don't finish something, they won't be criticized. If they have too much going on at once, they won't have to do anything well at all. If they do good enough excuses, people won't expect much of them. I guess one thing, I don't want to make a whole section on this, but one thing I've noticed really helps with this is guys who have a stay-at-home mom and kids. They are so risk averse when it comes to their families that they refuse to take any risks whatsoever. And I mean, it sounds like a nice thing. Yeah, okay, well, you got mouths to feed. A lot of guys refuse to leave the military even though they're killing themselves on it. Their wives are dependopotamuses because the military kind of knows once you have kids that you are very likely not going to leave because there's the risk involved with that. Unfortunately, again, people have kids and get unemployed all the time. So the failure is kind of a self-inflicted one, assuming you're preparing properly. And I would argue it takes a very strong father. I would say red-pilled father, but I don't want to take credit for that. A very strong type of father or a strong person who's got obligations to be able to take calculated risks in order to succeed. Because risks would be easy if there was no chance of failure and there was no consequences. That's why they're called risks, because they do have consequences, because they do have things on the line. But part of being a man, and one of the few things that separate us from the other gender, the women, is that we are a more risk tolerant gender. And this is how it plays out. Now, again, this is not saying make stupid decisions that have a feeling this one will work. The wind's pointing west. We're not talking about that. We're talking about calculated risks. I hate how I have to add a don't eat paint warning to that, but there's always some idiot who's like, yeah, I quit my job to start a drop shipping business. Now my kids are crying because they're starving. I'm like, dude, it's not my fault. You're completely ridiculous. But we're rambling here. Let's get back to it. Distorted self-image. Again, because their needs were not met in a timely, judicious fashion in childhood, nice guys developed a distorted view of themselves. With this naive, immature logic, they came to the conclusion that their needs were not important, neither were they. It's all a basis of toxic shame. If they're called on to take care of a critical, needy, or dependent parent, he receives a double dose of toxic shame. And as a result of their inability to fix, please, or take care of these parents, they develop deep-seated senses of inadequacy. There is a strong case to be made for irrational self-confidence. Yeah, fake it till you make it. You're not actually that good. But here's the problem. It's not so much, and this is like the most red-pilled thing you're going to hear. It's not so much whether the words are true or false. It's whether they give the intended result. If that sounds like womanese, then it is. It's basically how women speak. I'll say whatever it takes. No shame, no whatever. As long as I get you to do what I want you to do. Crying, mad, whatever. Works very well for them. Now, if you'll notice, kind of one of the common themes here is a lot of the things that we talk about are taking female strategies and adopting them to male sensibilities. Again, I had the thing there. I wish somebody would kind of push on this one more because it'd be nice to see. And essentially the difference I've found between a successful implementation of this and a non-successful implementation is whether you're chasing emotions or objective standards. In this case, objective standards. Your inadequacy or defectiveness, like I'll give you a hint. Just about everybody is incompetent where you work. I don't mean that as a slight either. I don't mean everybody's stupid and you're brilliant. I mean, nobody is confident about what they're doing, and most people have to learn things as they go. The modern workplace is not stable. We don't have like cabinet makers and cobblers and masons now that have had the same job that their grandparents had in the guild system, and stones don't change. Everything is constantly shifting. And so the skill isn't so much in rote memorization. Do I know all these facts? It's knowing where to go look for them. Because, again, military example. There used to be two trades. One was called radio operator. The other one was called signalman. The ones that do the flags, the ones that do communications, the one that advise the captain on who's got seniority in whatever situation, fleet maneuvering. The radio operators were the guys that build circuits, broke down circuits, basically the eyes or the ears and the mouth of the ship. They got combined into one. They called it naval communicators. And then they also added IT and security onto it. So you essentially had 4 jobs. And everybody kind of specialized in one. But the really good people didn't specialize in any. Because there was so many things out there. The skill became how quickly were you able to take a problem, find the applicable resource, and then quickly skim through and see what you need to do to solve it. And that's kind of the solution to a distorted self-image or inadequacy. You got to develop the skills that make you smart at adapting to things and learning and picking things up as you go along, realizing that it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be good enough, and sometimes even slightly less. But, it's something they can live with, and it's better than before. We could talk about narrative managements there, where you can actually, turn a failure into a success as long as it's framed properly, but that's kind of outside the scope of this. The point is, irrational self-confidence is the kind of thing that helps the kind of person who thinks that the world needs to work like a Swiss watch. He thinks about perfection. He thinks that if things aren't done right, they shouldn't be done at all. All those same errant things that worked great for stonemasons in the 1300s don't work so well now. Again, this is the one thing too. So about the career-wise, this is the one sphere one place in the sphere that's really underserved. I would argue that's because most people in the sphere are complete screw-ups. And so they can't really tell you things. There's a good section. Like the Married Red Pill's got some good guys. But again, they got lives to live. They don't have time for it, and they're 7 years behind the pickup artists. So, in 6-7 years, we'll probably have the most amazing resources ever. But for now, there's a Red Pill Workplace. There's Uncle Vaz's Corporate Land series. There's Dewey McGill's Negotiation and Days of Dread career stuff. But that's basically it. So I would say for the guys here listening to this one now, and how many do we have right now? So right now we got 55 listening, 25 of you hit like. I appreciate that. The other group of you guys, I'll appreciate you soon. You guys are kind of the tip of the spear on this one, just so you know. The getting stuck in dysfunctional but familiar systems prevent nice guys from getting the life they want. Again, it's over old ground. People would rather live with the story that's comfortable, that they know the ending of, that's absolutely tragic, than make their own story and have a chance of failure. And even though the failure is something you can adapt and thrive out of, if you're slowly dying in your job, you're clearly able to survive all kinds of hardship. So why wouldn't you? It beats jerking off in your living room, He kind of gets a little bit wishy-washy here at the end, realizing your passion and potential. As I stated above, nice guys I counsel are generally intelligent, talented men. All these men work on recovering from the nice guy syndrome, and they begin to accept themselves just as they are. Just be yourself, bro. Again, this acceptance of self allows them to embrace it. I would argue it's not good enough because that's a coping strategy, and the whole point isn't to cope, it's to thrive. I would argue irrational confidence for 2 reasons. One, if you're a neurotic person who doesn't believe in himself and doesn't believe in your actual skills, and you think of yourself as lower than you actually are, it kind of works to counter that. So you end up aiming way past what you're capable of, which allows your real skills to go through, as opposed to if you think of yourself as subpar, you're actually going to sabotage your skills so you meet that identity you've created for yourself. Secondary thing of this, and this is important, so listen close. People don't know anything about you unless you show them or tell them. First day on the job on ship. I actually wrote about this in the book. Again, Fuck Files, Amazon, great read. Give it a shot. Links in the description. If not, I'll put it there later. Mahoney, he was like this chain-smoking Newfie guy, or Nova Scotian. I think it was Nova Scotian. Anyways, first get on ship. He's got this raspy Batman voice. Sickly man. He was a sonar operator, so you can tell they don't see sunlight very much. But you tell her, all right, ordinary seaman, let me tell you how it works. Your first day here, pretend you know what you're doing and people will believe you. And I swear to God, it worked like a charm. It was absolutely amazing. For a lot of it, like I was trained in my job and I knew how to do my job, but just acting confident in the ability to do my job allowed me to gloss over a lot of the parts where I was a little bit iffy on, because people don't know what you do as well as you do. So if you give them a front of confidence and irrational confidence, they're going to see that as generally better than a guy who's insecure about himself, but more competent. It sounds weird, but you know what? Nobody dies at the workplace right now when a project goes under, so it works. Again, he's got a lot of wishy-washy stuff in this stuff. A couple stories about Charlie and wanting to fly. I don't find this stuff too applicable to us, but I mean, read through it. We're already this far in. It's not hard. The next part, though, is charting your own path that allows nice guys to get the life they want. So most folks, nice guys included, do not consciously take responsibility for creating the kind of life they want. Most people accept where they are and act as if they have little power in shaping an exciting, productive, and fulfilling life. So he encourages nice guys to visualize creating a life where they do what they love and get paid for it. And if you don't know what that's like, well, you're watching me on the internet ramble about no more Mr. Nice Guy and then talking about banging broads. But no, seriously, like honestly, in my military career, there was a bunch of things I enjoyed, a bunch of things I didn't enjoy. The deployment was a good example. I hated it while I was in it, but the longer time has passed, the more I only remember the good stuff. But one thing I will say is being an instructor at fleet school was the most fulfilling time I had. I actually truly enjoyed it. And so the idea of sharing information and teaching and helping others, I find this to be extremely rewarding. And so when I made the decision to leave corporate, which I did that to leave the decision to leave the military, it was a nice segue. It was me fearlessly taking a calculated decision to go into what I want. Now, I had certain preparations. Obviously, I built up a nest egg. I don't know how long it takes for companies to be profitable, so I set aside 12 months of expenses, lived a little frugally at the start. It's managed to surpass my expectations well off. That first year was not nearly as difficult as I thought, but it was a calculated risk, and it paid off. I put the skills in behind it. I've got qualifications. I've got training. I know what I'm doing. I had some irrational confidence to it, and here we are. So that's something to think about. I'm not that smart. Well, I mean, I was, but I try not to think about it because it just makes me do stupid things. But you guys are equally as good, if not better than me at stuff. So there's no reason you can't do this decision in whichever manner it matters to you. I'm not going to tell you to start a drop shipping business or be an entrepreneur or, whatever, porn star. I don't like telling people what they should do because it's not my job to take the responsibility for your life from you. Even though a lot of people have that sheep in search of a shepherd attitude, I don't find it to be helpful. If you're truly red pilling, if you're truly getting through this, then you've stopped letting other people dictate your life to you so that you can live or you can have life happen to you. You actually start making your own decisions. And if you get nothing else from this, I say that every episode, but if you get nothing else from this, get that. You start to think for yourself and take responsibility for your own decisions and make decisions that are in your best interest, period. So I do like, though, I talk about how, like, the military, you think about that on courses, like, everybody else passed this, I'll be fine. And he even says it himself. What one man can do, another man can do. We're interchangeable widgets. And that's not so much a bad thing. The next part, again, he tackles on the perfectionism thing. Letting go of trying to do it right allows others to get the life they want. So rather than being just a few insights and illustrations written for the benefit of a handful of clients, my effort became directed at producing something that would be deserving of publication and widespread distribution. I began hearing things like bestseller, Oprah, and get rich. What was once an effortless labor of love began to falter under the weight of expectation. In order to live up to the lofty standards, people were suggesting my book had better be good. Not just good, perfect. With that agenda, I labored for 6 years to complete No More Mr. Nice Guy, and the most common question I was asked by friends and family was, when are you going to finish it? Over the years, the manuscript went through at least 3 major revisions as well as extensive editing. Numerous factors contributed to the length of the time it took to finish, but the number one reason that I thought it had to be perfect. Unfortunately, this gross misinterpretation had a number of detrimental consequences. I believed I had to write everything I knew about this. The original manuscript was 4 times its present length. I believed I had to be an eloquent writer. I believed the text had to be flawless. I went to therapy to find out why I couldn't finish it. My children became disillusioned, predicting that I would never finish. My wife half seriously threatened to leave me if I didn't finish. Finally, he had a breakthrough. A wise person suggested if I give myself permission to never publish it, I had an immediate sense of relief. He goes on for a couple more pages on this, but I will use my experience. Obviously, I've written a book as well. I've been talking about it twice already. And something I found. So the first draft for me was easy. It took time, but like finishing it was easy because there's no expectations of it being perfect. I just want to get everything down, get it to a certain size to the point where I could break into a narrative structure. Worked out well. The editing process was where a lot of this stuff came through. So I had to have it perfect in my head. I got to try to get all the spelling right, all the punctuation right, the chapters right, organize it right, and it went through probably 3 or 4 revisions more than it needed to. So here's the point of this one. I eventually hired an editor. I got catfished by the editor, and they screwed up so much grammar stuff in there that by the time it went to print and I had found out about it, it was like they have this like 3-day period before you publish where you're not allowed to change it, but you can see it. So that sucked. So I essentially had to hire Nick August, who, if you don't know, he's the author, or he's the publisher of Punch Riot magazine. Pretty good read. Check it out, punchriot.com. Had to get him in there to fix it up. So here's the thing. I wrote a book without worrying about failure and without worrying about it being perfect. I made the best decisions I could to get it out there as best as possible. I made those certain perfectionist mistakes which delayed it. But then once it came out, there was a giant screw up. So what did I do? I fixed it because I was smart enough to know how to fix it. And since then, it's done absolutely amazing. It's been, honestly, I cannot believe the success it's had right now. It's nice to know that I'm much better off than a 100-page pamphlet written by some dude named Legends of Men, who's like a National Reserve Guard who pretends like he's a General Patton. If you don't get the reference, that's okay. You're a good person. So a lot of it is just being willing to get it in there. And then since doing it, I started joining like a couple writers communities because a lot of guys suggested it might be worthwhile. And I noticed most writers, and I think this is a good metaphor for everybody in the office because I don't think it matters what you're doing. But most writers were a third of the way through their science fiction novel and they kept asking a whole bunch of questions about publishing and about the end state as a crutch to keep them from actually working on their books. Well, should I cater it to the audience first or should I write what I want and then let the audience come? How do I build a brand? How do I do this? How do I do that? It's like your manuscript's not finished. These aren't your problems yet. These are excuses to get you to avoid these problems. So you can map that to your workplace as well as you want, but I guarantee you a bunch of you have those guys at work that refuse to finish or take steps or to take risks or to move up in the promotion hierarchy or whatever it is that involves success for these exact same reason. And they probably do a lot of the same things where they talk about the corporate vision. Meanwhile, they have to worry about something right in front of their face. Be present. Again, and it ties into his next part where identifying self-sabotaging behaviors allows nice guys to get the life they want. And this is all self-sabotaging, by the way. We call them, I think Rich calls them askholes. But picture the kind of guy who comes into the Ask Married Red Pill and he asks a stupid question. Well, my wife did this, my wife did this, my wife did this. What do I do? And it's the stupidest question. We actually had a giant essay on it saying you don't want us answering that. Because the answer to that question is, well, what do you want? Guy never has an answer. He just wants us to tell him what a right course of action is based on a red pill thing. It's that clubhouse masculinity where you just want to become part of a group that can do all the thinking for you so you don't have to worry about it. Absolutely ridiculous. It's not worth it. So he brings up a story about Sal. I'm not going to, I don't, honestly, the first half, I really liked his stories and anecdotes, but the later on the book you get, the less like impressionable I have on them, or the less resonant they are. Back to this. So career-wise, like, what do you want? and a guy doesn't know what he wants. Generally, if you're asking somebody else to tell you what to think, it's because you don't know what you want, and you want somebody to kind of guide you. The best solution for that is to understand, back it up. People don't know what they want. People are very good at knowing what they don't want. I'll use a little career strategy I used all the time. So when I was moving a project forward and in my role, somebody's like, I need you to build this, or I need you to design this, or I need a swim lane chart for this. So they don't really know what they want. They kind of wishy-washy tell you some things. And I found the first time I did it, I wasted a ton of time in meetings and meetings and meetings and finally got something, and it was never good enough anyway. So what I found was a much better response. I put something together. And it is amazing for somebody who doesn't know what they want, how much clarity of thought they have when you give them something they don't want. And that first process was just amazing. It didn't matter if it was good. I didn't really care. As long as it was somewhat competent, looked like I put a decent amount of effort into it. Somebody would look at that, and then they would actually be able to tell you what they do want. So I would argue for most guys who don't know what they want, and they're looking for somebody to answer questions for them, whether it's career in this case, or relationships, or whatever, focus on what you don't want and remove those. And then with whatever's left, just make an arbitrary decision. Because chances are you're either A, going to find out whatever it is good enough, or B, it's going to help you clarify extra things you don't want. Now, this is also good for boundary enforcement. We talked a lot about that, crossing boundaries. You guys ask, what do I do for my boundaries? And then you go and you listen to your favorite red-pilled slideshow preventer on YouTube, or a slideshow presenter on YouTube, and he tells you, well, you don't want a girl with hair cut short, or you don't want hair with colored green, or you don't want girls with daddy issues, or girls with tattoos. Again, more of what you should think and what you should want. And you're going to accept that, and then you're going to end up with like a girl who's got no tattoos, super long hair, but she still treats you like trash. You're going to be like, I don't get it. I did everything that Cortez told me to do. What's wrong with life? It's because you didn't think for yourself. You didn't act according to your own best wishes. You let some dude who just wanted to get affiliate sales tell you what to do with your life, and you don't want that. But with boundaries, that works better because you have these gates of, I do not want A, B, C, or D. As long as you don't meet those, the rest is negotiable. And you're going to find maybe you preferred brunettes, but you end up with a blonde that has none of the red flags. And you're like, all right, we can live with this. Turns out that the blonde brunette thing really didn't matter too much. Or you don't like tattoos, but you find a girl that has all the right things done. She has no red flags, but she's got a tattoo of a frog on her ankle. It's like, well, whatever, who cares? You get over it. And I'll tell you from experience with my tattoo, after 6 months, you don't even notice it anymore. Like, I honestly, sometimes I'll get out of the shower and I'll look and I'll finally remember I've got one. I'm sure a lot of guys have this issue, unless you got a face tattoo, in which case it's staring right at you. But even then, I assume most people forget that it's there. It's just one of those things. Oh boy. All right, I normally don't do the chats in the middle of these things, but Sage Press Jinth, can I have an SMV of 8 when I'm 70? Dude, don't tism up this chat, man. We're here to solve problems. Don't ask stupid questions. SMV, we provide numbers to it as like a general heuristic or a rule of thumb, but you're asking me to tell you a yes or no question. Like, and let's say I get it wrong. Who's going to hold me accountable to that? Nobody. And you already have an answer in your head of what you do want. Can I have an SMV of 8 when I'm 70? You already know he's going to say yes and I'm going to argue with it, or he's going to say no and I'm going to argue with it or agree with it. Just don't worry about that stuff. As a guy, you don't get to pick your SMV anyway. A girl picks it. They decide. They want a guy that's above them in whatever their little hierarchy is in their head. So they're thinking somewhat hotter than me or somewhat better than me. Whether you actually are or not is irrelevant. It's all perception, and that's why you can't objectively raise your SMV. There's things that you can do that will generally work that way. Being attractive, not being unattractive, being fit, being in shape, class 2 jawline, or whatever the incels are talking about now. That stuff can all work. But the one tell you can see of a guy who has an inflated sense of self, and not in the irrational confidence way I talked about, more of in a self-delusional gamma type way, is when they start telling you their SMV. And it's even funnier when they start using percentages. Well, I'm a 6.75. I'm like, no, you're not. You're an idiot. So I know that's not the answer you wanted for that question, but it's the answer you need. Which ties into the next point. Developing a more accurate view of the world allows nice guys to get the life they want. Do you ever wonder why some people seem to have so much more than you? More money, better job, nicer car, prettier wife? Do you envy these people? Do you resent them? Do you wonder what it is? And part of this is expectation management. He talks a bunch about developing a more accurate view of the world. He brings up childhood life experiences. And like I said, go through that. It's definitely worthwhile. Here's the thing I find from it. There was a great mathematical modeling that was done about why all your friends have more friends than you and why everybody you've ever slept with has slept with more people than you. I don't want to pull it up right now because I don't want to make this any drier and nerdier than it has to be. But it was a neat way of pointing out that if you have 10 friends, it's like 8 of them are going to have more friends than you. And that's because people who have more friends are more likely to be one of your friends, or girls that sleep with a lot of people are more likely to have slept with you. So that's why a lot of guys are complaining about sluts. Where's their trad girls? And the problem is, like, if there's a trad girl, if there's a virginal girl, and there's less of them, sure, but they're not going to be the ones you're going to find where you're looking. They're going to be the ones that dad hooks them up with somebody, you know, the 5 Amish guys that still have that. So you kind of, as much as we say accept the thought apocalypse, it's not a comment of despair. It's kind of an aligning of reality to expectations. People have tons of sex right now. There's a economic reason behind it, actually. It's not the failings of mankind. It's in the agricultural revolution. You would work on the farm like 10 years old or whatever. So by 17, you would get your own cottage. You'd work on your own farm. You can get a wife. You get married. You have a bunch of kids because you need them to work during the summers. It was easy, and I've talked about it before, but let's say you're sexually mature at 15. It's probably closer to 13, but we're just picking some numbers out here that are definitely very legal. 16, sexual maturity. You can keep it in your pants. You can go through a 1-year dry spell until you got your place, you got your farm, you got your crops, and you're going well. So that's doable. And then once you've managed to make enough food to survive off of, you're essentially economically in surplus. And so you can take on family responsibilities. Move forward from that, you got factory jobs. 18, 19, you get that job at your dad's factory, you got a good job, makes you enough money that you can buy a house that costs 3 years' salary, and then at that point you can have a wife and a family and all that good stuff. Or you have the GI Bill after a couple years of military service. You can tell a guy to keep it in his pants from 16 to 18. Fast forward to today. You have to go to university, get a 4-year degree, sometimes a PhD, sometimes a doctorate or whatever. You're now telling people, yeah, for the next 10 years, you got to go without so you can have your nice virginal situation. It's just not going to happen. Now, being how girls are offered sex at every opportunity since they were 16, they're most likely going to have more than you. They've started earlier, there's no consequences to it, and economically, it's just impossible. So part of aligning reality to your expectations, it ends up you quash those stupid moral indignations you have where, I don't like slutty girls. It's like, dude, I would argue the goalposts have shifted. But, I mean, you could argue that same thing from the 1950s. Once the pill became a thing. Because it wasn't that people didn't enjoy sex because Jesus told them to. It was because babies cost money and they didn't want to have them and there was nothing you can do about it other than very dangerous procedures. So it wasn't that people were moral, it's just they were prevented from doing things, and now they're not prevented. Again, you can call this like a moral failing of people, but they just respond to the environment they're in. And once you kind of make this understanding, it's going to branch out to all kinds of areas in your life. Why does this corporate environment keep pushing me to stress and do more and push these things on me? It's because you haven't given them any reason not to right now. Well, why are these people treating me like trash? It's because you're allowing them to treat you like trash. And you start to notice the way you act and the way you present yourself writ large is what allows people to respond to it in the methods they do. So for a large part of it, if you're treated like trash, it's because you're presenting yourself like somebody who should be treated like trash. Or as Archwinger puts it in one of his great essays, women act as shitty as you let them. That's it. And he brings up some other stuff here. Then his epilogue. So, that's right. I guess this would be the last chapter. Well, how nice is that? So anyways, this is the No More Mr. Nice Guy. I'm glad you enjoyed the series so far. We still got a couple minutes here. So let's stick with the chat here. We'll talk to you guys. Wow, you guys have been super busy. All right, so no super chats, no questions, other than that one about the SMV8. But yeah, in general, so okay. To wrap this up, I've talked about a lot of things from Robert Glover's No More Mr. Nice Guy. I've, at certain points, tied it in as best I could with the experience of married red pill and single red pilled guys. I've tried my best to articulate certain concepts that we know about that allow you to better interpret this thing. What I'm going to suggest now is you don't let me tell you what to do. You have to learn it for yourself. Like, there's all these things, and they're good heuristics. Are they true? Are they not true? Doesn't matter. If by reading this book, you start to act in a way that better serves your self-interest, then it will have succeeded at its goal. And this is something that a lot of guys have to learn, especially ones with the spot of the tism. Words have two sets of meanings. There's the surface level meaning or open communication. That's me telling you information and you understanding the information on the surface level. That's the carrier or the wave. But then there's the carrier. There's a meaning behind it. So why is he using these choices of words? Why is he telling me this? If this isn't true, why is he saying it? There's always a purpose behind words. In my case, flatly put, these words, the purpose of these words is to get you to watch my YouTube channel for longer, subscribe, like, go otherwise. That's the underlying assumption here. It's kind of neat when you think of it that way because it opens you up to at least opt into your manipulation. Because this is manipulation to extent. Same thing as a girl crying to hopefully you help her, or a baby crying to hope you pick them up. Everything is manipulation. Words are generally designed to get you to act in a certain way. The question you got to ask yourself is, does it improve my lot in life, or does it meet a certain need of mine to allow this person to manipulate me in such a way? I would argue in this case, yes, or I wouldn't be doing it. If I didn't help you run through with some cliff notes, with No More Mr. Nice Guy, with examples like this, it's manipulating you into understanding how not to be a nice guy and to remove unattractive behaviors from your life. And all I ask in return is watch time. So you're like, you know what? That's a deal I can live with. And I would argue this is kind of one of those things I noticed about the red pill. Guys tend to join because they just want to get laid. And they kind of leave with a sense of self-actualization. So I call it the first and only beneficial bait and switch for men that exists. You come in for one thing, you leave with another, and as a better person. So I kind of enjoy it. But I guess the next question is, so what's the next sidebar going to be about? So I did a poll earlier on the corporate account. That's 4R Consulting. If you guys don't follow it, at 4R Consulting, one word. And a lot of people suggested practical female psychology. So I'm going to do that one for the book, but I'm going to do a couple episodes of one-off posts, kind of like Michael's story and what was the other one I did? Michael's story and, Confessions of a Reformed in a Cell. So I'm going to do a couple more of those and then probably going to get into practical female psychology next. Although a part of me really does have a soft spot for when I say no, I feel guilty. I'm almost thinking I should kind of run it in the order that we would expect guys to read it from the Married Red Pill. But again, the decision's not out finally yet. I'll set these up so you guys will know when it happens. Anyways, I'm going to leave you guys to it. That's it for the episode. I think John wants to come on and do a little fireside chat, so I might set up a live stream for that. I'll let you know. Just keep an eye on the channel. Hit like, hit subscribe, hit the notification things. It should tell you. From what I understand, most people are getting told about this stuff, but I'll catch you guys on the next one.